Let's dive into the articles that have been going around about draft night.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix gets drafted. They call you when the pick is happening.
Right.
You know, there's a Minnesota article that came out. A reason that Kirk left was they talked about them drafting a successor high. So that was one of the reasons he comes to Atlanta. Talk about draft night, Kirk Cousins, the Atlanta Falcons picking Michael Penix.
Yeah, I think you're reminded again that there are things you control, and there's a lot of things you don't control. And so let's deal in reality, and recognize that fact, and then be a steward, not an owner. So I just believe that I got to steward what comes my way and control what I can control, which is what a steward does. But a steward doesn't worry about that which they can't control.
Yeah.
An owner does. An owner would be like, oh my goodness. So I just got to steward this and just do kind of what I've always done as a player and let the chips fall where they may.
Before your brain starts to compartmentalize and realize what's controllable and what's not, the immediate reaction when Michael Penix gets drafted.
Well,
or if it was a phone call right before.
Yeah, I had I'm trying to think, it was 21, so that would have been 3 years ago. Vikings 3 years ago. I was finishing up a round of golf before the draft on Thursday, and I'm on the 18th hole, walking up the fairway, and Clint Kubiak calls me, our OC. And he said, I just want to give you a heads up, we may draft a quarterback tonight. I was like, okay.
And this was on Thursday?
This was on the Thursday, a few hours before the draft.
Yeah.
So I understood that, for a while, teams are always thinking about succession plans. They're always thinking about that. And they didn't end up drafting one that year, but you're made aware that, this is a possible direction it could go. So my point is this isn't a foreign concept. There's an awareness that this is the NFL. Anything can happen. And so it kind of was a part. I remember I was committed to Michigan State. So I was trying to go to Michigan State, but they didn't offer me yet. I go on my official visit, no offers. They explained to me at the visit, they said, we've offered 5 other quarterbacks. If any of them commit, we will not offer you because we're going to take one quarterback in this recruiting class. If all 5 don't commit, we would then maybe send you an offer. So you'll do this official visit, but no offer, go home, and we'll call you if something happens. So we did the official visit, and a week and a half later, I get a call from Coach D'Antonio. He offered me a scholarship. What he was saying was they went 0 for 5. So I said, okay. And I didn't commit right there in the moment, but I slept on it. The next day I called him. I said, I'd like to be a Spartan. So I committed. But I did understand I was the 6th choice.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, so I signed my scholarship, and back then, once you sign, you can't back out. You have to sit out a year if you transfer. So I'm locked in at Michigan State. No way to get out. And he calls me 2 weeks later, and he said, hey, there was a quarterback who didn't sign on signing day. He's extended his recruitment, and he's coming up to Michigan State for a visit. We're going to offer him. We think he's going to commit. His name's Nick Foles. And I was like, okay. I said, now a month ago you told me that there were 5 guys that if they committed, you wouldn't offer anybody else. Now I committed, and those same rules don't apply. You're now offering somebody else. I said, what do you think that makes me feel like? So, and Nick was the man. I'm so glad our paths crossed. We were together for a year, and he's been a Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
So, but I remember at the time thinking this is going to be tough. Nick's a really good player, and probably only one of us will play at Michigan State. So I say all that to say this whole competing for your job, coaches having to have a full quarterback room, have good players, trying to, get as much depth as they can. It's more copy and paste than it is something new for me, because this goes so far back to kind of how it always has been.
Right. So it's fair to say Kirk Cousins, the Falcons, there's no beef involved.
No, and I don't think there can be. I don't think it's helpful. We're trying to win a Super Bowl, and it's hard enough. You know what I mean? It's hard enough. So let's all be on the same page, and let's try to go win a Super Bowl.
I'm stuck on the Michigan State thing right now.
Oh, hang on. One more before you go back to the Michigan State. Because I was going to say, too, you brought up the example of Minnesota and Kubiak calling you on Thursday, hey, we might draft somebody. We just had Ra on, and Ra was kind of in the mindset of what did he say? There was a line that he said, but basically communicate, when we needed to communicate. He's like, what if I told him before that, hey, we might draft somebody high, and then you don't end up doing it? What can still happen to a psyche? Not that it would go sideways, but there's all these variables that go in on how to communicate, and they're not always going to be right. But it just had me thinking about that. It's you have a phone call. It's hey, we could be taking a quarterback tonight. Doesn't end up happening. It's well, they're looking to replace at some point.
Yeah, and there's also going back to reality.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of like, hey, you may not like what you hear, but like it's reality. I don't know what to tell you. Like I'd love to change reality, but reality is one thing. It's reality.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Michigan State.
Yeah, let's go.
They go 0 for 5. Why didn't you just go to Ann Arbor?
So, tremendous question. And this would probably pain some Michigan State people, but growing up in the state of Michigan, like if U of M offered me, I mean, come on.
You're going.
That's a iconic program. And at the time, as Chad Henney's the starting quarterback, I mean, they pro-style offense,
Jake
iconic coach in Lloyd Carr. Like, they did things in a way that people respected. So, yeah, but you have to understand, I was so far not on their radar. Like, I was nobody. And they had Ryan Mallett.
Yeah.
Ryan Mallett had committed to them and was signed, and for good reason. I mean, the guy was so talented. And once you get a Ryan Mallett, you're not even looking. And so, yeah, I wasn't even – I don't think I was – I have to go back to that staff someday and ask him, like, do you even know who I was? I don't think they even knew.
So you didn't have an offer?
You didn't have an offer.
Not even close. Like, I didn't even speak to somebody from University of Michigan. Like, I was so far off their radar. The only reason Michigan State came in was because their quarterback, their Ryan Mallett, decommitted.
Mm-hmm.
So they were left kind of at the altar in December, like, what do we do? Because I walked off the field of my last high school game with no scholarship offers. So all my recruiting happened in like the last month of the recruiting
insane.
process. Yeah.
So were you fully expecting to still continue your football career even if you didn't get an offer?
So when I was playing, I was very aware that like Division III was on the table.
But what about walking on?
Nah, I was thinking I want to play. So to just like hold a clipboard and do the signals and like live the dream of a Division I play, that didn't interest me. I want to compete. So I visited the Ivy League. I flew to Princeton, I remember, on like Thanksgiving weekend. My dad and I went to Princeton, and we walked around the campus just to like, hey, if we can't get a scholarship, maybe the scholarship is to get into a school of this kind of prestige. Yeah. So that I was very serious about the Ivy League. I remember flying to UConn, and UConn said like we'd maybe offer you like a gray shirt. Like it was crazy. Like just standing there like, please offer me a scholarship. I'd like to play for you. And they'd be like, we're just not sure.
God,
sitting with Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, and he's like, we're not going to offer you, but we would give you a walk-on spot. And my dad goes, how much would it cost to go to Northwestern? Just as a dad, you have to pay for it. He goes, I never forget. He was being honest. He said tuition at the time, 2006 was $38,000 a year just for tuition. And my dad's like, it's going to be tough, coach. Like, I got to be honest, it's going to be tough.
It's going to be hard.
So, yeah, so but it's interesting because then you go play against Northwestern. Mm. And it was just such an odd dynamic where it's like, I was begging you to play for you.
Right.
And now I'm playing against you.
And now I'm dropping 28 on you right now.
It was like
a
unique dynamic.
Yeah.
Dropping
dimes.
Dropping dimes. And when growing up, where was the line for you? Were you Michigan State or were you Michigan?
It was neutral. My mom went to Iowa.
I don't think you can do that.
Her dad played at Iowa. So I was a Hawkeye fan. And it was another school. I went through for them, worked out for them, toured the facility, like the offer never came. And I can't say enough how everything worked out. But it was kind of just neutral. Watched Michigan State, and just kind of enjoyed watching good football because my team was really Iowa, was who I was watching.
What was your size as a senior?
So I was definitely undersized. I played my last game my junior year at like 6'1.5", 158 pounds. I remember that being I'm light.
Yeah.
And then
scraggly.
And then to add insult to injury, my 40 was like a 5'2". Nice. So I was like skinny, short, and slow. So like you're not doing it.
You can throw the ball a little bit, but
yeah. So then my senior year, I played at like 170. And I remember going to Michigan State and stepping on the scales now post-senior year at like 180 and just being thrilled. So I didn't look the part, didn't have a Division I body. My dad always thought I'd be a baseball player because he just assumed I wouldn't be big enough to play football. But, I remember at my signing day event where the head coach talks about all the guys they signed, and he said, Cousins reminds me of when I was a DB coach for Michigan State with Nick Saban, and we were coaching against Drew Brees at Purdue. Watching his high school tape, his ability to have like different arm angles and throw with timing and accuracy and see the field, he goes, it reminds me of Drew Brees. And I thought, if I remind him of Drew Brees, like that's at least I'm on the right track, you know? Yeah. So that was a good sign.
Well, brother, you've had a hell of a run.
Thank you. Hopefully there's more to go. The best is yet to come.
Yes.